in the name of the light. For it was from the light that in the beginning all things were made, and the story is timeless. It is daily nativity, it is hourly nativity, it is the permanent sense of reality as opposed to the illusions of the world. The Great White Brotherhood, the spiritual body of world servers, desires that mankind should be illumined in many ways. And therefore the subject that they have chosen for this evening is the invisible world all around us. Man knows that he is not merely form consciousness. Man knows that he is a great deal more than the visible portion of himself. And man desires to understand more of his internal nature. In one sense, the raison d'etre of life can be said to be experience in the mastery of ourselves. To master ourselves is perhaps the biggest task that we have, and it will occupy all of our time if we can afford it. But can we afford not to devote our time and our energy to the pursuit of cosmic universal happiness? I was quite puzzled many years ago when I began to think about life from the standpoint of, is life happy? Well, what a silly thing for me to think. Of course life is happy. I should have said, is man happy? Many times in going into communities for the first time, you are impressed with the gaiety and the joy of people. When you go to a party, everyone smiles, and they all seem to be happy. And therefore the world can be said on the surface to appear to be very happy. But there are hidden heartaches and complex problems that trouble our world today, which you and I are aware of. We seek the solution to these problems because we feel that it is the will of God that the world should be happy, truly happy, not just comfortable, complacent, satisfied. We should have a sense internally of the reality of our own being. But unless a man is illumined, unless a man truly has a spiritual experience whereby he enters into the invisible world around himself and makes that salient connection with God and with the hierarchy of the invisible world, he remains a part of the mass miasma, which is mass confusion. Stoplights, stop and go, caution, fast-moving traffic, hard-hitting television cells, conflicts abroad and at home, in our cities, on our school boards, in our churches, everywhere, conflict, competition, staggering imagery that divorces us from reality and causes us to mentally reel. This is not the divine plan, we say. That is, if we do not say it or give voice to it consciously, we recognize in ourselves that this cannot be the divine plan. What is the purpose of life? We ask ourselves again and again. The purpose of life must be understood to be the purpose of God. For God and life are synonymous. Without God we would have no life. But why then is the world the way the world is? We ask, we answer, we probe, and we seek. But there is an invisible world that has every answer for which our souls crave. And it is the world of the ascended masters, the world of those who have overcome life, who dwelled among us in Ur of the Chaldees, on the plains of Mamre, in ancient Egypt, in Lemuria, in Atlantis, and at King Arthur's court. Seekers for the Holy Grail, seekers for the mystical knowledge, seekers for truth have been legion, and the few have found. And the few who have found have desired with all of their hearts to share the buoyancy of that expression with their fellow men. They have yearned. But, alas, many were not ready, and some ate the golden apples that on the outside shone with a luster of hope, full of abundant promises that turned into ashes when the teeth penetrated the substance. This has happened again and again. Illusions, confusions, dead ends, and all of this is quite the lot of man today. But now the world is no longer just 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion. But the world today is over 3.5 billion and heading for 4. Communist China today numbers somewhere in the fantastic neighborhood of 800 million people. 800 million. We today are around 200 million, and often quite disturbed by 11% minority. But this is not here alone in our nation. It is all over the world. Did you know that in apartheid Africa, the Calvinists suppress the Negro people, put them down, and say to them, you must live outside of this city. You can come in here, but only you. Your wife must stay outside the city when you are here. They limit the number of them that are allowed in the capital city. Alan Paton, in his Cry of the Beloved Country, pinpointed this, and it does make some interesting reading. So there are problems in the world of race. There are problems of creed. There are problems of international relationship and problems of education. I hope, by God's grace, to be able to bring you some sensible solutions, some participating endeavors that we can use to bring about change, to benefit this world, to benefit you personally, to direct into your consciousness the flow of the light that is real and tangible and comforting and beautiful and brings soul sense to man. You have it. You have it now. You have as much of God now as you will ever have. And all we need is the realization of it. There is no difference whatsoever among people as far as the one part of the duality, the twain. Man is a dual being. He is two people. He is the divine image still, but he is also the human image. The human image is constantly in the state of becoming, and it is intended to become the fullness of the Godhead, the fullness of the deity. This is no desecration. If God created man in his own image in the beginning, in heaven's name, what is wrong with our return to that image? Is there anything wrong with that? To become identified with the deity now, when God made us that way in the beginning, and we are not now in that position. Can anyone honestly tell me that our cities today are examples of the city of God mentioned by St. Augustine? Can anyone tell me today that our planning is dedicated to the betterment of mankind in all areas? Certainly in many areas we do strive to bring to our posterity, as well as our current generation, our contemporary society, some of the great benefits that would come if the alchemy of universality could penetrate the world and make people to understand that love is of many kinds, and that many of the things that we call love must be shed because they are self-love and doctrinaire to the idea of personal aggrandizement. We seek to make ourselves great through using other people to achieve greatness. We step on people one by one in order to rise, and this is why we degenerate. The law of the circle, which Emerson commented upon, shows us that whatever comes to us in life comes to us because we sent it forth sometime, somewhere into the universe. Nothing happens by chance, my friends. Nothing. All things are law, and chance is only another name for law. And therefore, we ourselves are the directors and arbiters of our own destiny. We can choose this day or any day whom we will serve, but the soul substance that was given to us as a censer of fire, as a sacred coal from the altar from on high, will dissipate its energies and die unless it is nourished. And if it die, it often may not be rekindled again. And this is the second death referenced in the Scriptures, which is truth and no fable. Man is given soul substance. It has fire and light. It penetrates through the physical form. It illumines the mind. It casts its brilliance everywhere if we let it. But this soul substance must be nourished, and only light can nourish it. We cannot nourish it by darkness. Hate will not do it. False information will not do it. Only the truth will do it, because the truth is the mystical key that opens up the door into reality. And I think that it was a beautiful poem which went into the plaque, the bronze plaque, inside our nation's Statue of Liberty, that declared, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free," and went on to terminate and say, "I lift my lamp beside the golden door." And so the concept of liberty is very dear to our hearts, but we have lost our liberty as we have expanded this great nation. And this was seen by seers of old, who recognized that as the people would pass over the Oregon Trail and come here to the West and fill this nation with people, with humanity, that it would become a seething serpentine mass, all going in different directions. Let us then realize that God did not plan that phase as it has materialized. God did not plan what has happened in the world, nor do I think that man has planned it. I think that it has been planned, however, and it is no accident. And therefore we ought to examine tonight one of the vital factors of our times, and that is the mass control of media. Media, television, radio, magazines and books, the peddlers of smut, and all of that. Let us examine it for a moment and see what impact is made upon our society by even subliminal advertising, by new techniques that are being purveyed by the crowd from Madison Avenue, whose subtle influence is felt everywhere in America and poses the greatest threat to the growth of this great society that has ever been from the foundation of the world. You see it in the misshapen sense of our youth. You see it in the horrible struggle that goes on in the rising rate of crime and of violence, and in the apathy that men feel often toward religion, their dissatisfactions. We know that something is not correct, and we ask ourselves, what can we do about it? There must be something we can do. Well, 2,000 years ago, the mission of the Lord Christ was a great and mighty one, which has made its impact upon our age. But do you know that even before the Master took birth, and before the star shone with its brilliance, the brothers of the shadow were at work in their dens and lairs of iniquity and darkness, drawing up the blueprints or the green prints or the black prints, whichever you wish to call them, whereby his mission would be defeated before it ever started. And when I deal with the world of the invisible, I dare not deal only with the world of good, which is the only world that exists, but to man caught in the nets of mental confusion that are spread everywhere as webs of darkness, he does not see the great divine portion of himself. He sees often these nets of illusion, and he falls into them as the fly. And the spider pounces, and man is devoured piecemeal, one by one. We are usually not taken in groups, although they love to get us in groups if they can. And they love to destroy groups. They would love to destroy America and all that it stands for. They have no interest, these invisible brothers of the shadow. And who are they? They are people also, the same as the ascended masters are people, who at one time lived here upon earth and studied, mind you, the pathway to the light. And then they went so far and they began to feel, as their knowledge increased, that they were as wise as God. And they saw no reason why they should pay allegiance to the laws of the universe, which were established laws. They felt that they, by reason of their wisdom, could change those laws to their own liking. And thus rebellion ensued, and this was a reality. And the reflection of that reality is here in the world today. It's here now. This is no false idea. That's why things are as they are. We have had the power of that bad example. And it has permeated society, and it lives and lingers on, as the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched. The fire of God is not quenched, and this worm dieth not. It lives in the psychic realm and in the astral realm, and it preys upon mankind. How does it work? Just how? Well, it works in devious ways. When the man had the demon, and Jesus asked the demon what his name was, the demon answered, "My name is Legion, for we are many." The legions of darkness are many. Mankind are only ploys, chessmen, marplots. They are moved upon the chessboard of life. They're checkers. And the dark forces seek to call checkmate to every divine plan that God starts. And they will use anyone as a tool. They would use me as quickly as they would use you. They'll use anybody that will submit. They are not particular. Of course, it has been said that the devil never bothers anyone that he's sure of. So if you're bothered, perhaps you're pretty safe, but don't count on it. Make your calling and election sure by personal examination of the motives of your own heart. Is your neighbor crafty? Does your neighbor know how to manipulate people? Does he know every little clever trick? Do you envy him? Would you like to be able to do it also? Don't. If you could see the hospitals and places of incarceration of the world all over, and the many problems, the multitude of problems that are there, you would be seeing the errors that sometimes Machiavellian and other times just John Smith were piled up layer upon layer, and they always find their target mark. They go back exactly to the doorstep of the one that sent them out. So send out love. Let it be the love of God that qualifies activity for the good of man. Impersonally. Do not good to man to be recognized, to be seen. Let your light shine. Let it shine in the world community. Let it shine to those that seem to be without hope, whether ill or discouraged or depressed. Let your light shine. It is the challenge of the age. You are a son of God in your duality. Half of you is a son of God. But it was Abraham Lincoln who said, the world cannot exist half slave and half free. And so we cannot exist half slave and half free, because sooner or later the enmity of the one half will devour the other. Now this is fine if the good in us eats up the evil. But if the evil eats up the good, it's just too bad. I know that it was the Master Jesus who said, if the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? It's very great. If it occupies control of ourselves. And so we go back now to the invisible world, the world of the mass media. And we see now that we are puppets unless we assert our own divinity. We are puppets in the world of the manipulators. They manipulate our society. They do it from the invisible world, and they have their pawns in the world. Did you know that right now, today, you are facing a controlled press? And this is true. You have a controlled press that tells you what it wants you to know and suppresses in the news that which it does not want you to know. I didn't say that Lyndon Johnson did it. I wouldn't say it if Mr. Eisenhower was in there. I don't think it's necessarily political. But there are people who dictate to the greatest men in Washington and in our world. There are men who can do it. They can pick up a telephone and they can say, look, I want this killed. Quash it. And when they speak, heads roll or heads obey. There is no question. You don't have to be president in order to command men. And today the world is filled with a relatively few that have almost absolute command. And many years ago it was said, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And therefore, some of these people have been corrupted by power. And you and I are manipulated, and the whole world is manipulated. But we are not only manipulated from without, we are manipulated from within. You get on a bus, a train, an airplane, and you sit down in a seat. Someone sat in that seat before you did. And subtle, invisible, magnetic emanations penetrated out from the spinal column in the central nervous system, from the sympathetic nervous system, and eddying currents, vortices of thought and feeling of the person were transmitted to the fabric and the substance of the vehicles. You come and sit down there. Or you touch the hand of someone who is very shook up in some ways, and their vibrational pattern will fracture yours. You can be broken in your etheric body. And what is your etheric body? Man has, of course, 7 bodies, but there are 4 lower bodies. And the 4 lower bodies of man are, of course, the dense physical body, which is comparable to the sponge. And then there is the emotional body, which is comparable to water. And it represents the water element, even as the physical body represents the earth. And the emotions are pulled by the influence of the moon. The moon pulls on the water body of man, and during the full cycle of the moon you must be extremely careful if you have an emotional nature, because the moon will draw the water in man into an activity of emotional instability. And therefore the word lunatic indicates that the ancients also were aware of the power of the moon to influence the emotional body. Then man also has an airy body of mind substance, and this is comparable to the air. But then we come to one more body that is akin to photic force, the electronic essence of the divine. We come to the etheric or memory body, and it is this body that is so vulnerable to attack from some individual's imprints. And I'm not talking about fingerprints, I'm talking about the subtle, invisible power that even a handshake or a contact with clothing or with even a chair that someone sat in. Well, you may say, you are making me to feel that the world is already contaminated with a radioactivity that I don't have the ghost of a chance of fighting. That's not true at all. I intend to tell you that you can not only fight it, but you can do it realistically, and you can achieve a magnificent God control of your being. Now that's a long subject, but the idea is caught in this picture here. This is an illustration of both your spiritual body of life, your God presence, the I am, the divine id, the divine identity, ID, the spiritual self, and that, of course, is this upper figure in the chart, and these circles around it are the actual area where the treasures of heaven are stored. Because, you see, everything that man does is categorized automatically. It's either benign or it is not benign. If it is not benign, it cannot rise to become a treasure. It has to stay here and be interred with our bones. It must linger in the substance of our being until we purify it. It is energy we drew from God, just as money in the bank could be taken out. And now we've taken it out and we must use it. We use it and we misuse it is what we do. And if we misuse it, it returns back to our doorstep for purification. But the good that we do goes up the silver cord, follows up here, and becomes a part of this vast electronic circle. Now this is why, although God created all men equal, mind you now, He created all men equal, they are not equal today. You know very well they're not equal, but they're equal still in opportunity. And everyone has it. It is the misuse of opportunity. It is ignorance. It is misunderstanding. It is susceptibility to mass confusion. It is deceit practiced by lying entities that come in and masquerade and say that I am Jesus, or I'm Saint Germain, or I'm this, or I'm that person. These lying entities deceive people. Sometimes people are deceived by very old spirits. But I won't go into that. That's a little diversion. I wanted to go on with this. This is what we're interested in. Because in the Bible we find a very, very wonderful scripture that will illumine you on this. And I want to give it to you tonight. It states, even as one star differeth from another star in glory, even so is the resurrection from the dead. And this is the point that proves this point. It shows that in heaven, in the ascended state, one master may have more light than another. Just to ascend does not mean that the moment you ascend, that you suddenly become the absolute. You ascend into the absolute, but you cannot be more than you have externalized or laid up in heaven of treasure. You know this. It's law. And that is why you should never complain, dear hearts. Don't complain. That energy becomes complainant energy, which you must redeem because it becomes a part of the mass weight of the world that drags people down all over the planet. And when you give glory to God, and it is sincere, and it pours from your heart, and it activates the cells of your body and increases the fire of your mind, then you're pouring out into the world not vituperation and confusion, but you are emanating light. And light goes through all dense substance. And light purifies you, and it purifies your neighbor, and we all can find our freedom by it. Whether you're down here at the hem of the garment of God, or whether you're up here at the apex or summit of Christ's accomplishment, if you raise yourself, it all raises. The whole creation moves together toward one grand and noble design. And the tools of darkness are to divide us and conquer us. We need not think exactly alike because we are children of God, and we are learning. If we were accomplished masters in our life of fait accompli, we would be complete then, you see. But we are here in this world of experience to obtain our mastery, and for no other reason. Again and again you hear people say, it's my life, and I will do with it what I want to do. Children are rebellious to parents. People rebel against authority of many kinds. And we understand this. It was the old Scotsman who said, "Nay, thief, ere had a good opinion o' the law whene'er he felt the halter draw." It's true. But let us have a good opinion of the law, because God is both life and God is law. Now I represent the great masters. I do not come to you as a master. I come to you as a servant of the masters, to serve you, and I do it most humbly in my heart. I have no designs upon you. I have no desire to control you. I give you your absolute freedom to accept or to reject anything that I tell you. You are the arbiter of yourself, but man does not do so to one another. And there are myriad people upon the planet today who are seeking to control others for some specific purpose. There is such a thing as mass hypnotism. There is such a thing as mass creation of illusion. There is such a thing as projection of shadow and harm into the world. And when this occurs, it is most unfortunate. People may be woke up in the middle of the night and cannot sleep because of hatred projected from other people. Invisible influences sent through the ethers. You may say, oh, but they're going to suffer for that. My dear friends, there is a Satanist church in San Francisco with a nude woman on the altar and a man with horns that performs marriage ceremonies, Anton LaVey. There was long ago Aleister Crowley in England who practiced black magic and passed himself off as though he were a white one, and he was not. He came to Boston and other cities in this country, and I understand that he had some connection with what is called the Individualist Society. And I would like to mention in connection with that the difference between the brothers of the shadow and their rebellion and the brothers of the light. Those who are of the light do whatever they do for the glory of God. They do not do it for themselves. But the brothers of the shadow always work with the ego, with the id. The brothers of the light work with the Holy Christ self. This is the Holy Christ self. It is the divine mediator between the God presence up here and the human. And when the masters work with the Holy Christ self, The energy pours down through the silver cord at the top of the head, and the light just comes in beautifully, because the masters deal through the Holy Christ self. And then man looks up. Look up and live. The sign of the brazen serpent. As Moses raised up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be raised up. We must raise up and elevate something within ourselves that is life, and that is God. It is the power to raise us up, but we must first raise it up. If we raise the God within ourselves up and we begin to look up, everything begins to flow down into the chalice, the grail of our presence, of our humanity, of ourself. Our world becomes changed. And light actually can come forth through your flesh form. I have seen it. I've seen light pouring through people. You see, as a human being, you are not any different, nor am I, than a baboon or a monkey, in the sense that our physical forms are just a warm, snug, little comfortable envelope into which is tucked something that beats our heart. But that's not so of consciousness and of our real true self. Our true self can fill a room. Our true self can fill a city. Our true self can fill a continent or a globe, a planet. It can ensoul a solar system, or it can expand into a galaxy, or it can move mountains in a universe that is so far away that you could not even think of the light years, how far away it is. Your true self is unlimited. It moves by spirit. I think it was Philip who was caught up in the spirit and was carried from one city to the other. Man can still do that today. God has not changed his nature, but man has changed his in many ways. Man has physically become weaker. He has mentally become wiser. He has spiritually degenerated in the main. And that is why we stand today at the crossroads of the age. The ascended masters are waiting right now to bring in the golden age, to develop the true ancient golden age once again and bring it to a greater height than it ever was before. Because society has always worked that way. God proposes ideas, just as man proposes them. And when God proposes his ideas, man accepts them. And man, that is a manifestation of God, begins to build. And he builds to a great height. And then, as soon as a misuse of sex energy comes in, as soon as a lack of integrity comes in, as soon as the high moral sense is lost, the age crumbles away, because that which holds society together is the high moral standard of the Christ. We may sometimes say, oh, but it is nice to play. The flesh may like this idea. This is the world and the things of the world. But, dear friends, we do not want our children to follow in our footsteps if we have made errors. We want our children to be better than we are. Why? Is it because we ourselves wish that we had been? All of us have made errors. God does not hold anything against any of us for our errors, because he knows that the errors are their own recompense. They make us pay for every little joy that we illicitly steal. And we don't have to steal joy in order to have joy. The joy of God is not a temporary, enervating joy. The joy of God is a permanent joy, because your mind can surge up out of your being and contact this strata of divinity, that while it is everywhere, it withdraws from this atmosphere to a certain degree because mankind do not welcome it. And ask yourself this question. If you went to someone's home, and when you got to their house, they came out and they said, I'm awfully busy, I don't have time to see you today. And they rather scowled at you when they said it. Would you come back tomorrow, or would you stay away? I would say that you would probably stay away. Well, of course, it has always been said that God is different than man and that he doesn't retaliate. Of course, he did say, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." But I rather think that what God is trying to do always is to encourage us to achieve our own solar inheritance. And what is our solar inheritance? Well, basically what it is has to do with the geometry of cosmic creation. Practically everything is really based on the law of circles and cycles. Even the years, the solar years, everything is based on that. And so just as our presence is seen here surrounded by concentric rings of energy, so the sun, although much bigger than an orange, is circular. And it emanates its light not just toward the earth in one linear movement, but there is a peripheral expansion of that light into the entire universe, so that if the earth is here and Mercury is here, all of the solar system is warmed and revivified by the light. And we can learn a valuable lesson from this. If we can recognize that we are not intended to come here into a mewling little body and be rocked and changed and given our bottles and trained in reading and writing and arithmetic to enter into a world of competition and have a little pleasure and get married and raise more babies and then die and then have the words R.I.P. put over us, "Rest in peace, and may God be with you," or "May you be with God." Oh no, there was a more beautiful design than any of us ever stopped to realize. And this is why we have a certain affinity toward poetry. That is to say, we are very much in love sometimes with certain passages, such as the chambered nautilus, "Build thee more stately mansions, O my soul, while the vast seasons roll, and leave thy low vaulted past, till each new dome, nobler than the last, shall shut thee from heaven with a dome more vast," or something like that, etc. The whole idea being that the seashell, the little shell on the sea, is really the remnant of the creature that inhabited it. And of course, the little creature can go out and weave a new shell, you see, and we do the same with our bodies. I've recently talked to some very staid people, had a strange experience over in Idaho. There was a group of people there that were very orthodox in the sense that they believed only in the supreme sacrifice of the Master Jesus, and they believed that by his sacrifice, that this is why they love him so much. And you know, I don't love him for that reason at all. I love him because of his greatness of soul and who he is. But they loved him because he paid some penalty for them, and this was the reason. And they wouldn't have to pay it, you see, because he paid it. And they were absolutely death on the idea of re-embodiment. This was the most horrible thing. I sometimes wonder if the morticians encourage this. I don't know. But it was really a terrible thing, because they really take care of those things, just like in ancient Egypt, you know. They go ahead and they went ahead back there and they had these marvelous sarcophagus, and embalming was a tremendous art back in Egypt. They took far better care of the body of people after they passed away than they did while they were living. And they were very precise in their instructions of just how this and that was to be cut and placed, and, well, how they were to be wound, and it was a terrific thing. So I went over to this place, and I was told by this man that took me there, he said, "Now, I think that this woman may throw you out. In fact, you probably will be under terrific attack if you bring up re-embodiment. So he said, whatever you do, under no condition dare to mention re-embodiment, because if you do, you'll get thrown out. So you better not talk about it." And I went over there, and of course, we started to talk, and we went around Robin Hood's barn for a while, and then gradually we suddenly came to re-embodiment, and we got into the subject very deeply. And when the evening was finished, one man and one woman, jumped up, and they said, "Excuse me, good night." And out the door they went, And the rest of the people would come up, and almost to a person, except for one person, they said, oh, we've believed in re-embodiment all the time. But what had happened there, they were all afraid to tell each other, and they were all afraid that they were going to be ostracized. And so the meeting turned out to be an alchemical experiment whereby a certain amount of good came out of it. And of course, it does prove the fact that you should not be afraid to speak the truth and give the truth to the people, as Tom Paine said. Give the people the truth and the freedom to express it, and all will go well. After all, you cannot expect that everyone is going to agree with you. Many people will not agree with you because there's something in their nature that forbids acceptance of it. But we cannot condemn that, and that's why I'd like to say a word on intolerance of intolerance. You know, everybody likes people that are tolerant. But that's the trouble with the world today. There's too much toleration and too much intoleration. And we usually find that the people who are tolerant of everything except other people's intolerance. You know this is true. And as a result, criticism, condemnation, and judgment goes out into the world. Now, I don't criticize anybody, and I love everyone, but I take a stand for the truth because the truth is more precious than anything else. And we cannot deny, as ostriches do, that there is a great deal of activity going on in the world that is not desirable. And that is why, when I examine some of these things, such as the mass media, control the media, when I examine what has happened in America, the invasion of the communist elements into our society, the invasion of the communist elements that are in the churches as well as in the secular society, the invasion of the communist elements that moves today to deny to our children the texts that were given to our grandmothers and grandfathers, that enabled them to develop the moral sense so that they could walk out of a schoolhouse in an orderly fashion and say to their mother and father, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, thank you, please pass the potatoes. Today, we have a strange globular society created by the media of TV. We have a disconnection occurring in the etheric body of man, whereby man is no longer connected to the mass unity of the world, but he is connected only to a composite creation that he has manufactured from the cloth of the undertaker who wants to pull man down, you see, and strip him of his spiritual power. This is a very dangerous thing in itself, because the communists in our society are moving rapidly toward a master plan and a strategy that says we will take over the United States either by hook or by crook, and if we cannot do it that way, we will do it militarily. And they are now in the process of doing all of these things simultaneously. And their timetable is ahead of time, not behind. And we are poor saps sitting here and having our energy stolen, our children brought up with discords being spread and promoted and promulgated right before our noses. And how many ministers today are standing up and waking the welkin? How many are sounding the alarm? How many Paul Reveres are riding around the circuits of the country today and alerting the people? And why do the people need to be alerted? They enjoy what they have. People like good food, gemütlichkeit. They like friendship. They like a good story. They like entertainment. They like horse races, betting. Oh, they like many things. The world is full of things that people like the Dutchman said. Everything I like is either forbidden or makes me fat, and things like that. Well, This is the way it is, but we know it isn't right. And we are the people who are always jacking ourselves up. We're saying to ourselves, we wish to be people of worth. We are not content. We are not satisfied. We ought not to be. And that is why you are here. And I consider that this fine audience that came out tonight came here not because you wanted to hear a man speak, but you came here because there was hunger in your heart for something higher. And that hunger is definitely the reality of your divine presence. I am not able, and no man is. Jesus, Saint Germain, and all of the masters put together, if they walked right in this room now, without your permission, would not dare or be able to change your world. Only you can do that. I can talk. I can tell you the truth. I can radiate, same as the masters do. You can radiate right back, send love. We can pour love to our fellow men. We can do many things. But in the final analysis, the one door that we all have to step through alone is the door of initiation into our real self. Basically, the whole world is insecure today. This is what we really have. We have a terrific insecurity. It's a field day for the psychiatrists and psychologists. It's a field day for the people that are out manipulating. Why? Because these people love to have, as Montaigne said, one man's misfortune is another's fortune. And they're very happy that they have these problems. You know, in the little towns of the Midwest and all over the country, as well as in the East, when the towns were small and the doctors were country, when they wanted to go to Europe, they often took out Mrs. McGuffey's appendix, or they performed a tonsillectomy on little Tommy Smith. And this is how the process worked. You understand what I mean, I think? That people, that is especially the medical profession, would actually take organs out of the body when they did not have to be. And this has been more or less accepted. In fact, it was accepted in the past, but it was not too well known. It wasn't practiced by every physician. Many doctors are extremely ethical today, and many were then. But it was done, and still being done. Well, this, in a way, is a good illustration of one man's misfortune is another's fortune. Well, of course, the only thing here is, the only misfortune that people had then was that they picked out the wrong doctor. Do you see? This is what happened. So, actually, what we have to do in order to grasp reality is tear down the veil in the temple of being between the outer court of the temple and open up the veil into the Holy of Holies. Man must experience regeneration by following the Christ in his footsteps. And how is it done? Oh, it's not done the way the Orthodox tell you, dear hearts. You can have many wonderful experiences in the Orthodox way because God recognizes sincerity. You don't have to be a mystic in the worldly sense in order to actually achieve God. But how is it done mystically, though? How is it done the Ascended Master's way? Well, first of all, it is done by the recognition of the truth that you are a dual being. If you can be deceived into thinking that you are Mary Tyler or Peter Smith, that that's who you are, you're going to defend that personality with your whole life. You're going to put everything into that life. And that's understandably so. But if you can recognize that when God created man in his own image, that he simultaneously created you then and there in his own image. This is where there's a missing link now. I'm going to try to give you that missing link. I told this to some people, and they said, well, you're the missing link. But I'm going to try to give you the missing link, because the missing link is the Christ, of course. But people don't understand what this means. They relate it entirely to the life of the great Master Jesus. He was an avatar, he was the way shower, he was the Son of God. But you follow me now in almost a Socratic method. I ask you now a question. Is there any higher image than the image of God? Answer me. There is no higher image than the image of God, is there? All right. If God made man in his own image, did he not create man then in the highest image? If he created man in the highest image, is it any blasphemy today for man to claim his unification or identification with the highest image which God created him in? Is it? Yet, when a man makes the statement, humbly affirming that and states, I am God, I am thyself, not saying I am God, and the rest of you people are dust. But when he says, I am God, and he claims that image, people say he blasphemes. Ought they to say he blasphemes? No, not if God created him in that image. Do you see? All right then. What is the difference between God and Christ and the manifestation of the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit? Is there a difference? I went to the Father and I asked the Father what the difference was, and he said, this is a triunity. I said, is that what the Trinity is? He said, that's what the Trinity is. It is the triunity. He said, this is only the three manifestations which agree in one unity. And he said, man calls it the Trinity and makes it, by deliberate design, to be a confusing doctrine. They say, oh, I believe in the Holy Trinity. Someone else says, I don't believe in the Trinity, I believe in this master or that master. What is a master? A master, then, is simply one who is made in the image of God. So a master is no more, and the masters admit this, is no more God than you are. They don't say that they're more than you are. They are elder brothers. Because they have climbed on the pyramid of life higher steps. They have touched the stars with their fingers. They have been filled with the abundance of God. And therefore the masters are the masters because of that. But what they have done you can do. And who they are, you are. You are bone of their bone and flesh of their flesh and substance of their substance. And the God of their hearts is your God. We are all one. The whole earth is one. Well, why have all this fuss, people say? Why worry about who's president? Why worry about any social evils? Why worry about unrest? Why? Because the dominion over the earth was given to you and I. God gave it to us. God gave us a responsibility. He gave us a verdant earth. We don't make our own shoes now. We don't go out and tan the leather. We don't cut out the patterns and put in the welts and sew them. We buy our shoes in the store, and we buy our hats ready-made and our dresses ready-made, and we buy frozen food, and we go all over the world and we gather these things together. We pay a few little dollars out of our pocket or write a check, and we get all these things, goods and services. Fine. And so we have lost our sense of the unity of life. We just simply do not realize that we are our brother's keeper. We hustle and bustle out on the freeways and we try to get somebody else cut out of a traffic lane. We won't hardly let people out. I don't know if you saw that movie or not, where they had a chimpanzee for an orang-outang driving a car, and they had him on the freeway. He'd sit up there and drive the car. I suspect that it was rigged up so that the man sitting beside him could drive it some way, but people would go by and their heads would turn and they'd nearly have an accident. So finally the police came along. I think this was down in Florida. The police came along. They were driving along and they pulled him over and arrested him, you see, because he had this orang-outang driving the car. And he says, well, he drives it better than I do. You don't have to be a sour puss. The masters have a very wonderful time in the higher state of consciousness. I found that out in quite a few experiences with the great masters. They're beautiful. Beautiful people. And they radiate their beauty. And you're missing the boat if you don't stop to realize just what you can do for people yourselves and what the Father can do for you. I can't do anything for you except to bring you the message of your own reality. And if you accept that message, take a hot coal. Blow on it. Fan it. Watch it glow. Now the coal is no longer just a small coal. The coal, like it was glowing with magnetic and atomic energy, begins to expand. Our consciousness expands with the coal. And we move and move and move in ever wider circles of illumination. Khalil Gibran, as I mentioned last night, and I want to say it again, said, of the Spirit of God, he said, it is a flame spirit gathering more of itself. And that's what we do. The God in us reaches out and takes more of ourselves. It's like one of the California yogis said many years ago when the ladies piled the fruit all around his plate until all the fruit in the room was piled up around his plate. So he got up, he took the fruit, started passing it all around the room and back to everybody. They said, oh, Swami, they said, that fruit was for you. He said, I am enjoying it in all my many bodies. If we could only forget the senseless foolishness of our separation, of our individuality, and this is what the black magicians want us to do. I don't mean they want us to forget it, but I mean they try to keep us always constantly aware of the fact that we're John Smith, that we've got troubles, that someone doesn't love us, and we're always on the defensive, constantly, and we feel the need to prove ourselves to someone. Don't try to prove yourself to anyone. God already loves you and knows who you are, and he loves you more than anyone else in the universe. He made you. Just love him in return. And love your fellow men in return. Quit qualifying the thing by the idea that this person does this or that, and because they do this or that, you can't love them. You don't have to love the wrong side of people. You don't have to love something nasty. You love the soul. The trouble with most people is that they feel that they have to love the human, and this is simpatico. This is sympathy. People reek with it. If you don't believe it, you attack somebody sometime. You're liable to have a lot of people defending the person you attack. Even if they deserve it, doesn't make any difference. People are liable to be sympathetic. They'll think, oh, I might be in that position. But God says, whom I love, I chasten. And why do we prune a tree? We prune a tree because the tree needs pruning. God chastens because we need chastening. He pummels us. He empties us that we may be filled. And what he empties out of us this swill. It's contemptible many times. We don't know it. We say, oh, I like that idea. But if it isn't true, that's the whole thing. If it isn't true, don't stick with it. Walk hand in hand with God down the trail. So the black ones, the dark forces, they just fan the ego. And you know, one of the cleverest tricks that people have in the occult field, and that's why I don't do very much of it, I'll ask you to forgive me if I sound egotistical. I don't mean to sound egotistical when I say this, but I suspect that there's probably very few people in this country that could read the past embodiments of people quite as well as I can do, and I don't mean it egotistically at all. But I'll tell you something. I have turned down money, pretty big money, because I don't want anyone's money. I want to be tied to no one. And I don't want to get involved in something like this. But this is the way they work it. Many times people will say, you were the Emperor so-and-so, or you were Queen Anne, or you were this or that. Well, back in Chicago many years ago, what happened is that they had an incarnation party, and they asked everyone to come dressed as they were in their past incarnation. And there wasn't a single commoner there. They were all kings or queens. And this is exactly, mind you, what happens. If you can make people feel important, I happen to know that several years ago, St. Germain came through me in a dictation down in Virginia. And he said, in this room is the re-embodiment of Queen Isabella, that I knew her at the court of Spain when I was Columbus. And he went on with this business. And he said, I'm not going to tell her who she is or let you know who she is, and I hope that she never finds out, because I don't want her to get overly impressed with her importance. Well, there was a colored lady there and a white lady. And I found out now, several years later, that the colored lady has been telling people for years that she was Queen Isabella, and she believes it with all her heart. And the lady who actually was Queen Isabella, whom I happen to know, finally dug up the idea that it was herself, and she got the tape and played it to herself in the sanctuary, and she became almost unbearable to live with for a while afterward. And she still is affected by it, and one day she told me, don't do anything to me or St. Germain won't like it. So you see, this is a byroad. It's a blind alley. It takes people away from the truth. And I want you to know, all of you, that there are many designs which I think C.S. Lewis did a magnificent job of in his Screw Tape Letters. If you've never read it, you should get it. Any of you, how many here are familiar with C.S. Lewis? Oh dear, you've just simply got to get acquainted with the man. He's dead now. But Mr. Lewis, in his Screw Tape Letters, he has there what he calls a series of dialogues by His Satanic Majesty Screw Tape in His Satanic Majesty's service to a junior devil on earth called Wormwood. And they do have a lot of gall. And you really, when you read it, you'll see that it is a very great spiritual document, because it shows you all of the clever little tricks and treachery that are involved, the intrigues of the invisible world. I think in one particular place he mentions something about, he says, now, Junior doesn't like his mother's shrill voice. So he said, what you've got to do is when she starts to holler at him, as she usually does when he does something wrong, you've got to make that voice shriller than ever in his consciousness, so that he just becomes absolutely insatiated with the idea that he can no longer stand her voice and runs out of the house. This way we'll get him down to the local tavern and we'll get him drunk. And then he'll forget all about going to church tomorrow, because he'll be so ashamed of the fact that he was drunk. Well, you see, the whole thing is a series of machinations which are almost Machiavellian, but it shows the intrigue and treachery of the psychic world in tricking people so that they either feel that they're not good enough to associate with God, or they're not good enough to have the light, or they're guilty for something they did to someone long ago which they feel in their mind is real, or they feel that in some past life they wounded someone. Now, I know of the case of two ladies in the state of California who have a sense that each one of them thinks that there was a tie between them where they had a lot of trouble with each other. And because of this, they're having trouble today. You see. Now, I don't say that they didn't have this experience in the past. It probably is true. But when you talk about burying the hatchet, which George Washington was supposed to have done, you know, he chopped down the cherry tree and buried the hatchet, you know. And then he told, what did he say? Huh? What did he do? What did he do? Did he tell his father a lie? No, he didn't tell his father a lie. He admitted it. When you start being as honest as George Washington was in that story, and whether it happened or not is not nearly as important as the fact that you start being that honest with yourself, when you become glaringly honest with yourself, you'll be on the path. You know, the greatest trouble in the world today is dishonesty with ourselves, because if we can fool ourselves into thinking that we're something we're not, whether it's good or bad, you see, it's very easy for other people to fool us afterward, or an entity to come along and fool us. Quit worrying about the ego or the id. Start thinking about your magnificent divine being. Pull down that light. Pull it down. You can do it. You can do it in thought. Some of you are not familiar with the processes. Now, I'm going to tell you something. There are processes involved. This is no simple thing that I'm talking about. Oh, I talk about it very glibly, but it's not simple. It's complicated, and it will require study of the right kind. It will require attention of the right kind. It will require scientific knowledge of the right kind. You're just not going to get it otherwise. And that's what the Great White Brotherhood will give you. It's the study of a lifetime, not of just one moment. You know why people like to hear lecturers? They like to hear them because they think maybe there's going to be some vicarious thing done. I'm not going to kid you. I'm going to do as Winston Churchill said to the English people, I can only promise you blood, sweat, and tears. The blood is the symbol of your life, and the sweat is the efforts you will make of perspiration in order to get your inspiration. And the tears are the sorrows that you may have because you're going to many times realize that you didn't do it. But if you can accept that old axiom, it goes like this: for every evil under the sun, either there's a remedy or there's none. If there is one, try and find it. If there is none, never mind it. I have brought with me some very valuable samples of our work. One of the greatest things that we have is the book that I have written. I don't have it with me. It isn't printed yet. It is finished, but it is in the editorial room being edited. As you know, everything has to be edited that's ever written. Commas have to be put in. We expect it off the press, we hope, before Christmas. If we fail, as soon after as possible. That book will be one of the great assistances to mankind today because it is forthright and frank, and it has a wealth of knowledge that has been compiled over many years and covers many very valuable subjects. There's 33 chapters in that book. But I do have quite a few things here that I want to mention. These are absolutely free. This is a personal letter to the whole planet. It's to you as well as to me from Master Moria. The letter is, needless to say, very succinct. Moria has a driving energy. If you read this the right way, you really get it. You know, would you care if I read a little of that? Could I read that letter to you? It's not too long, and it's You can have a copy of it after you hear it if you'd like it. He says, "Beloved seeker for the higher domain, near as heartbeat, yet far as distant nebulae, happiness is. Many trivial conditions, molehills of thought and feeling, are mountain barriers forbidding the way to happiness, accomplishment, and truth. Love itself, the most wanted commodity on earth or in heaven, is misunderstood. The Creator of all that is cannot avoid love for His creation. Yet His infinite intelligence must compass a path toward permanent reality and happiness. Earth is a schoolroom where years, decades, or even an entire life may become a deserted waste place. Men squander their opportunities in palliation of real or imagined ills and upon self-pity. The magnificence of life, when viewed through the lens of truth, is exciting to the soul, and the dance of cosmic energy before God can reactivate the most sluggish disposition or system. Nothing of worth comes without effort. Psychic poison must be counteracted by spiritual poise. Recover your balance through attunement with our octave of light. The Christ consciousness shines in the darkness that the world manifests, but how can those whose eyes are blinded by outer sham and a willing of insensitivity toward the fine and subtle world escape the rounds of sense pleasures? For the ultimate enervation of the emotions and the nervous system produces emptiness and discouragement as the fruit of mortal satisfactions. The brothers of light salute the world, and each soul is to us a compatriot to be taken by the hand and led forward, not against the will of man, but only through consent. Yet the consent of purpose must be cognized and the higher way understood. Hierarchy exists as an indestructible body of servitors to humanity. Our robes of light are mantles to shield the young aspirant against the intruding discouragement of world discord. As we seek to point the way toward higher goals, we summon from within the heart the focalizing of energy toward cosmic purpose. Cosmic purpose is synonymous with eternal purpose, but the shortened span of mortal existence reveals itself as a thin membrane strung from point to point over an abyss of great depth, whose sharp rocks await the fall of the unwary. Sometime, somewhere, every soul who will become a part of the contributing worth of universal consciousness must cross this abyss, returning home to the central, intelligent, organized purposes of infinite existence. We show forth truth as it has never been shown before since man first entered the world of illusion. But perception and balance must be employed. Intelligence must pursue understanding, and the many facets of existence be melded, he says, into a wholeness of concept. Mere words will not in a moment delete or cancel out the banalities of thought and feeling that comprise the being and consciousness of man. Consciousness must be pummeled and unreasonability decamped. The unproven aspects of life must be shelved, tradition re-examined, self apprehended in its duality, and choices made if progress up the ladder of life is to be obtained by the individual monad. Ours is no silken touch of a gloved hand that seeks by a hypnotic caress to control the soul. Ours is deliverance by reason of universal will, which one can own through identification. He who identifies with God's will as it truly exists and makes it his own finds the greatest assistance possible forthcoming to ennoble his plans. This assistance is formed by higher perception, embellished by the vocalized energies of the brothers of light into a master idea, and consummated in the arena of life as the action of the Spirit of life, fanning into manifestation the flame of consciousness, of existence, of bliss, of the absolute, of eternal value, and bringing those values into the frame of reference of the time-space continuum. Well, the rest of it is 2 pages more. I think I'll just let you have it if you want it. I just wanted you to see a little of the content. And it gets better and better and better. It's like one of my secretaries was telling me that my little boy said, "Daddy, it gets louder and louder and louder." So that's the way it is. This gets better and better and better. It's free. We have here a book on the angels that appeared to the school children in California. A lot of you have it. Very beautiful. And our lovely alchemy course by St. Germain that sold more copies than anything we've ever produced has been printed on our new press and bound beautifully. And we have it here at a reduced price from now to Christmas, $2.95. And it's worth quite a bit. Then we have the trilogy of the Threefold Flame, which follows it up. And we have a record with a complete dictation on each side of Jesus the Christ. You can play on any 33 1/3 phonograph. We have those records. And we have John Kennedy's letter, My Fellow Americans, in a very beautiful form. And it has a picture that you don't see very often of the Kennedy family with Jack Kennedy and the children and Mrs. Kennedy. And the letter is very nicely done with a larger portrait on the inside, too. It's a very nice piece and a very reasonable. But we have a brand new book. This is off the press. Liberty Proclaims. It has 3 dictations that are given by the Goddess of Liberty. And in the very end of it, it has George Washington's vision of America, General Washington's vision by Wesley Bradshaw. It's all printed in there. It's all bound together. And I think that you should hear the poem. I wrote this poem, and you know how Robert Frost was. He liked to read his own poetry. So I'm just the same. I like to read my own poetry. So I'll promise you to bore you stiff with 2 pages of it. No, I won't. It's a prayer to the world mother. O Mother of the world, we are all children of thy heart, kept apart by triviality. We remain separate from thy cosmic ecstasy. Passions of cosmic freedom, when denied to all, bind blind mankind to sensdom, do enthrall to fight each other. We are pledged by dreadful doings, dining on mankind's shoddy, senseless spewings of aborted patterns charged with hate, delusion, senseless fate, confusions. Do thou now, great silent mother, teach thy children how to have no other than thyself, to hold our hands from mortal error, to keep our minds from mortal terror, to seal our hearts in purpose now supreme, to forge thy cosmic union, reality God dream. Long the night has vacant been from the light of thy radiant man-child, standing in the sun of united oneness. We confess to loss of happiness. Thy office of pure light fears no competition. Let none doubt thee, but find instead attunement with thy blessed head of hallowed thoughts, thy love which flows from glowing heart of cosmic dreams, from God's own musing, clears the air from each confusing dream of man that splits, divides, and saws asunder many lives, until all wonder, where's the blunder lying neath our feet? Shall it defeat us evermore, never to pause to take our store, with all our reason, wisdom, evanescent, vanishing to a point of nihilism? I am a child of cosmic diligence. Immaculate is thy concept of my willingness to be God-taught, to learn to love, to shatter matrices of dense desire. O cosmic mother, from thy lofty star position, set my heart afire. May I move by impulse of thy love to the fount of brotherhood, where washing feet of all my competitors, I shall serve them all, and see Poseidon rise, the new Atlantis of our allness, nevermore to sink into smallness of the lesser self that raiseth Cain. I am able now to serve and reign as thy beloved